You tilt your phone, search for the right light, and swipe through filters until your face looks a little more like the person you wish you were. Somewhere, an art student repeats the same hand again and again from a Renaissance drawing. Long before both of you, a Greek sculptor carved the perfect calf muscle into marble, following Polykleitos's silent canon of ideal beauty.
Life imitates art, far more than art imitates life. This results not merely from life's imitative instinct, but from the fact that the self-conscious aim of life is to find expression, and that art offers it certain beautiful forms through which it may realize that energy.
We have always lived by mimesis, even before we had a word for it. Yet, imitation is never innocent. When you copy a pose, a tone of voice, a lifestyle on a glowing screen, you are not just mirroring the world, you are editing it. Anthropologists like Michael Taussig describe mimesis as a kind of serious play, a way of becoming similar to what surrounds us.
The mimetic faculty, the nature that culture uses to create second nature, the faculty to copy, imitate, make models, explore difference, yield into, and become other.
Philosophers now speak of homo mimeticus, the idea that who you are is woven from all you have imitated, resisted, or exaggerated. So, what exactly are we doing when we imitate? Telling the truth about reality or inventing a new one? When the first Greek thinkers tried to explain why images move us, they reached opposite conclusions. Plato looked at mimesis and saw danger. In his dialogues, the world we touch is already a dim echo of the true forms, and art, whether a poem or a painted shield, only multiplies the distance.
Then, the mimetic art is far removed from truth, and this, it seems, is the reason why it can produce everything, because it touches, or lays hold of, only a small part of the object, and that a phantom, as for example a painter, we say, will paint us a cobbler, a carpenter, and other craftsmen, though he himself has no expertness in any of these arts. But nevertheless, if he were a good painter, by exhibiting, at a distance, his picture of a carpenter, he would deceive children and foolish men, and make them believe it to be a real carpenter.
Therefore, a mimetic image becomes a copy of a copy, a shadow pretending to be substance. Because it works through emotion, he feared it could sway citizens more than reason ever could. In his imagined republic, poets must be watched closely. Their stories might feel true, but feeling, he warned, is a slippery guide.
Imitation, then, is devoid of knowledge, being only a kind of play or sport. The imitator will neither know nor have faith. Neither science nor true opinion can be ascribed to him.
Some years later, Aristotle stepped into the same debate and reversed the light. For him, mimesis was not a threat, but a birthright. Children learn by imitation before they speak, and adults take pleasure in recognizing a gesture, a pattern, a face made visible through art.
Imitation is natural to man from childhood, one of his advantages over the lower animals being this, that he is the most imitative creature in the world and learns at first by imitation. And it is also natural for all to delight in works of imitation.
He argues that a well-crafted tragedy reveals universal truths that history cannot reach. Because, while history records events, art reveals meaning. We imitate to understand, and we understand by shaping experience into form.
Tragedy, then, is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, through pity and fear affecting the proper purgation of these emotions.
As these two visions collided, they set a tension that still pulses beneath our screens. Plato's suspicion whispers whenever a perfect image feels too smooth. Meanwhile, Aristotle's optimism answers when a representation helps us grasp something real. And between them lies the ancient question that continues to haunt our age. When we imitate the world, are we moving closer to truth or drifting further into illusion? Walking into a gallery of Greek sculpture, it's easy to forget that you are not looking at real bodies, but at perfected dreams. Polykleitos's Doryphorus stands in contrapposto, its weight subtly shifted, its posture poised, every muscle tuned to a mathematical harmony once described in his lost canon. The face is calm, the stance is balanced, and the proportions feel almost impossibly precise.
Polykleitos made a Doryphoros, a virile-looking boy. He also made a statue which artists call the canon, and from which they derive the basic forms of their art, as if from some kind of law. Thus, he alone of men is deemed to have rendered art itself in a work of art.
In classical Greece, mimesis was never meant to copy one particular man. Instead, it reached toward the body as it ought to be. An ideal made visible, a rulebook for beauty disguised as flesh. Even ancient writers, such as Galen, praised these statues as models of health, balance, and virtue.
Beauty does not reside in the proper proportion of the elements, but in the proper proportion of the parts, such as that of finger to finger, and of all the fingers to the palm and the wrist, and of these to the forearm, and of the forearm to the upper arm, and of everything to everything else, just as is written in the canon of Polykleitos.
And yet, beneath that stillness, a question begins to stir. When we imitate perfection, do we learn to see ourselves more clearly? Or do we focus on the version of ourselves we think we are meant to become? As Europe moved into the Middle Ages, the rules changed. The artist's work was not meant to freeze the visible world, but to reveal the invisible one. Figures floated in golden light, space flattened, scale bent to meaning. A saint could tower over a king, not because he was taller, but because he mattered more.
The visible is the reflection of the invisible. For the things that are seen are images of those that are unseen. The beauty of what is seen is but an image of the invisible beauty, and the things that come to be are signs of those that are eternal. Through the harmony of earthly forms, we are led upward to the simplicity of the divine archetype. Through the light that shines upon sensible things, our minds are lifted to that light which gives all illumination. Thus, the divine is known in all things, not as it is in itself, but as the radiance that flows from it.
Here, mimesis became a signpost, pointing beyond the material world. Viewers learned to recognize halos, colors, and gestures as visual codes, signs that promised a deeper, spiritual truth. Then, in the Renaissance, mimesis moved out of philosophical debate and into everyday artistic practice. In the workshops of Florence, Venice, and beyond, painting and sculpture were learned through apprenticeship. And that learning began with copying. Apprentices started with drawing after drawing. Hands, feet, profiles, folds of drapery. Again and again, they whirred from cartoons, model sheets, and the master's preparatory studies. This constant repetition did more than train competent assistants. It shaped a way of seeing. As apprentices copied the same contours again and again, those lines became an inner measure. Gradually, observation began to move through inherited forms rather than outside them. At the same time, a growing body of theory was giving representation a clearer framework. It treated the relationship between the visible world and pictorial form as something that could be studied, understood, and taught. In De Pictura, Leon Battista Alberti described painting through geometry, proportion, and the rational organization of space.
First of all, on the surface on which I'm going to paint, I draw a rectangle of whatever size I want, which I regard as an open window through which the subject to be painted is seen.
Alongside this, linear perspective offered artists a practical method for translating appearances into a stable visual structure.
I believe nothing more convenient can be found than the veil, which among my friends I call the intersection, and whose usage I was the first to discover. It is like this: a veil loosely woven of fine thread, dyed whatever color you please, divided up by thicker threads into as many parallel square sections as you like, and stretched on a frame. I set this up between the eye and object to be represented, so that the visual pyramid passes through the loose weave of the veil.
During this period, mimesis was closely tied to verisimilitude, the art of making something feel true. Therefore, even when Alberti evokes Narcissus as a founding myth of painting, the Renaissance understanding of imitation remains strikingly practical.
For this reason I say among my friends that Narcissus, who was changed into a flower according to the poets, was the inventor of painting. Since painting is the flower of every art, the story of Narcissus fits our purpose perfectly. What else can you call painting but a similar embracing with art of what is presented on the surface of the water in the fountain?
This ambition becomes especially clear in the way major artists used imitation as a form of research. Leonardo's anatomical and physiognomic studies treat the body as an intelligible system, so that drawing functions as inquiry as much as depiction.
The mind of the painter should be like a mirror, filled by as many images as there are things placed before it.
Meanwhile, Michelangelo's sustained dialogue with antique sculpture develops another register of mimesis, one oriented toward ideal form and calibrated intensity. Classical models are absorbed, and through that absorption, reformed into figures that strain, twist, and insist. Raphael, in turn, shows how imitation can be compositional rather than anatomical. By assimilating earlier solutions, he organizes variety into harmony until borrowed structures begin to read as a fully coherent language. Over time, this mimetic education also widens the space for difference. Once perspective, proportion, and figuration are mastered as habits of mind and hand, emphasis can shift toward heightened naturalism, toward idealization, toward expressive distortion. In this sense, Renaissance mimesis names a living process. Forms are inherited, practiced, and refined until they become supple enough to carry new intentions. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the Renaissance promise of order had become a powerful visual common sense. Painters could make bodies occupy space persuasively. Light could shape form with near scientific clarity, and sacred history could be staged as if it were unfolding in the viewer's world. However, once a language becomes fluent, it also becomes available for pressure, doubt, and rupture. The rules that once helped images feel stable, perspective, naturalism, convincing presence, can suddenly be used to press, disturb, and even fracture what looks true. That is why Baroque mimesis often feels less like a record of reality and more like a confrontation with it. Not only with how the world looks, but with its moral weight, its social hierarchies, and the uneasy textures that polite images tend to smooth away. For instance, Caravaggio pushes mimetic verisimilitude to the point where it starts to accuse. His saints carry the marks of the street: worn hands, rough feet, ordinary faces, unidealized age. In the calling of St. Matthew, grace does not descend in a celestial haze. Instead, it cuts across a dim room like a sudden verdict, arriving through light, gesture, and the blunt reality of bodies crowded around money. In the death of the Virgin, the sacred is staged without protective distance. Weight, mortality, and the intimacy of grief take up space. And the viewer is left with the difficult question of what holiness looks like when it refuses refinement. Here, mimesis does not merely make belief plausible, it makes plausibility ethically charged. Because it forces the issue of who can be pictured as holy and what kind of body is allowed to carry meaning. Artemisia Gentileschi inherits this Caravaggesque grammar: tenebrism, immediacy, dramatic cropping. But she redirects its force. Her mimesis is not only about the truth of surfaces, it is also about the truth of agency. In Judith's slaying Holofernes, the scene is rendered with such physical specificity: tensed arms, taut fabric, decisive grip, blood that behaves like blood, that the image becomes difficult to keep at a safe aesthetic distance. Likewise, in Susanna and the Elders, the female body is not staged for a calm, consuming gaze. Rather, it is shown under pressure, twisted away, guarded, defensive. Here, the mimetic image does more than persuade the eye. It exposes a social script. Who gets to look without consequence? Who becomes the object of looking? And how easily violence can hide inside what a culture calls normal ways of seeing. Nevertheless, as the image's presence intensifies, spectatorship shifts with it. The scene stops feeling distant and begins to feel shared, as if the figures occupy the same air and the same light. The frame holds, yet everything leans toward overflow. A hand reaches, a body turns, a shadow advances, and the viewer senses how easily the image could continue beyond its borders. Because the figures appear so near, lit as though the light source belongs to the viewer's own space, looking takes on the texture of participation. At its sharpest, Baroque mimesis turns this dynamic into meaning. Representation becomes a kind of witnessing, where the viewer's gaze carries weight because it helps the scene come fully into being. Gradually, the image begins to feel like a quiet test. What is being seen with clarity? What is being endured without protest? What is being judged too quickly? And what the very act of looking discloses about the one who looks.
Mine eye hath played the painter, and hath stelled thy beauty's form in table of my heart. My body is the frame wherein 'tis held, and perspective it is best painter's art. For through the painter must you see his skill, to find where your true image pictured lies, which in my bosom's shop is hanging still, that hath his windows glazed with thine eyes. Now see what good turns eyes for eyes have done. Mine eyes have drawn thy shape, and thing for me are windows to my breast, where through the sun delights to peep, to gaze therein on thee. Yet eyes this cunning want to grace their art. They draw but what they see, know not the heart.
So by the time Velázquez painted Las Meninas, that involvement had already moved to the center of the stage. The canvas is dense with watching. Velázquez pauses at his easel. Attendants turn their attention. The young infanta is presented with ceremonial care. And at the back, a mirror catches the king and queen, figures positioned where the viewer seems to stand. As a result, perception becomes part of the subject matter. The painting holds the court, the artist, and the spectator, all inside one visual circuit, where glances cross and roles subtly shift. Here, mimesis grows reflexive. It doesn't only offer an image of reality, it reveals the arrangement that makes reality legible in the first place. Framing, hierarchy, performance, attention. What remains is a scene that feels both immediate and constructed, as if the world is being staged at the very moment it is being seen. As we've seen, for much of our era, art learned to idealize, to spiritualize, to disrupt, and at times, even to turn back on itself. Then, the 19th century arrived, bringing with it a new kind of question, one that opened onto a different horizon. What happens when imitation no longer depends on the human hand? Photography answered with a cold flash of certainty. It appeared with the poise of a scientific instrument, catching shadows on metal plates and persuading viewers that these imprints of light revealed reality in its purest form. For the first time, mimesis no longer seemed to require belief or memory or personal bias. It only required a lens. Painters felt unsettled. Scientists were thrilled. And the public leaned in with wonder. Yet beneath that excitement, another doubt began to flicker. If a machine could mimic the world with such precision, and what became of the aura, that unrepeatable presence once carried by a human-made work of art? Later, Walter Benjamin would describe this fragile here and now as something mechanical reproduction inevitably thins, like breath fading on glass.
Even the most perfect reproduction of a work of art is lacking in one element: its presence in time and space, its unique existence at the place where it happens to be.
As photography spread, the idea of the real began to widen, moving beyond images alone. Literature, too, searched for new ways to grasp the texture of everyday life. Writing in exile, Erich Auerbach opened Mimesis with a striking contrast. Homer's bright, fully illuminated Cephuses and the Bible's deeper psychological resonance. For him, representation was never just a matter of reproducing events. It was a way of honoring the weight of experience. His readings suggest that mimesis can be meticulous, empathetic, and even moral. A way of holding on to the world when history threatens to erase it.
Figural interpretation establishes a connection between two events or persons in such a way that the first signifies not only itself, but also the second, while the second involves or fulfills the first.
And as his insights circle back to Benjamin's concerns, another layer begins to emerge. Perhaps copying does not only drain meaning, perhaps it can also help democratize it. Yet modernity did not stop there. As rationalization increasingly shaped society, Theodor Adorno began to see mimesis as a kind of survival instinct, an embodied sensitivity that keeps us open to others. In his view, imitation was never mere copying. It was a response, a gesture of attunement in a world rushing toward efficiency.
The old mimetic impulse, banished from rational cognition, lives on in art as the critical force that opposes the domination of nature through calculation.
And so, just as technology pushed mimesis toward mechanical precision, philosophy drew it back toward vulnerability. Between the lens and the body, reality began to feel both closer and harder to grasp. It was as if modernity had multiplied the mirrors and at the same time softened their edges. And this is where René Girard takes mimesis in a striking new direction, away from the surface of images and into the structure of desire itself. In his view, we rarely desire things in isolation. Usually, we learn what to desire by watching others, often without even realizing it. Someone else's attention can make an object feel magnetic. Their admiration becomes our map.
We assume that desire is objective or subjective, but in reality it rests on a third party who gives it value.
And so, desire begins to take shape as a triangle. I reach for that because someone else has already made it glow with meaning.
Our neighbor is the model for our desires. This is what I call mimetic desire.
We learn from others like children learn language, by watching, by repeating, and little by little, by making borrowed forms our own. And yet, within that closeness, something else begins to grow. Alongside the desire to experience life for ourselves, there is also the desire to become someone in the eyes of others.
The coquette knows a lot more about desire than Freud does. She knows very well that desire attracts desire. So, in order to be desired, one must convince others that one desires oneself.
And this is where imitation begins to matter in a deeper way, because it shapes more than social behavior. It affects the very texture of what we call reality. If desire is formed through images, through what others notice, admire, pursue, and reflect back to us, then reality never reaches us untouched. It arrives already mediated, charged with recognition, filtered through models, and already shaped by patterns of imitation we have absorbed long before we could name them. When artificial intelligence began generating images that looked uncannily like paintings, the reaction carried a familiar mix of fascination and unease. The brushwork seemed assured, the color choices felt deliberate, and even the expressions often suggested an emotional logic viewers were ready to recognize. At first glance, this new form of mimesis seemed to continue a very old story. One more chapter in the long effort to reproduce appearances with ever greater precision. And yet, the shift runs deeper than style. Earlier forms of mimesis, however mediated, still remained tied to a body moving through the world. An eye trained by looking, a hand shaped by repetition, a memory selecting what mattered, a sensibility giving form to experience. Generative images emerge through a very different process. They are assembled through pattern extraction across vast datasets, where forms are analyzed, correlated, and recombined with remarkable speed. So what they inherit is not perception in the human sense, but an archive of prior representations. This is where the philosophical question begins to sharpen. Because if mimesis has always involved more than resemblance, if it has also carried intention, judgment, memory, and the pressure of lived experience, then AI imagery complicates that tradition from within. These systems can simulate the surface effects of style with extraordinary fluency. And yet, they do so without embodiment, without situated perception, and without the historical vulnerability that gave earlier images their particular weight. The result can be persuasive. Often, it can even feel seductive, but it can also feel strangely untethered. An image that resembles artistic vision, while remaining structurally distant from the conditions under which vision becomes human meaning. And for that reason, AI does not simply revive the old problem of imitation. It intensifies it. It forces a sharper question. Is resemblance, by itself, enough to sustain what we have long called representation? Or in the age of synthetic images, is mimesis drifting towards something more powerful, more scalable, and more abstract than anything art history has ever seen before? You began this journey with a phone tilted toward the light, searching for a version of yourself that felt just a little closer to who you hoped to be. And now, after moving from Aristotle to Adorno, and from Caravaggio to code, one thing becomes clear. Mimesis has always been more than imitation. It is a quiet force, one that helps us read the world and rehearse our place within it. Art, philosophy, and technology each reveal the same truth. Copying is never simple. It can disclose meaning. It can distort it. And sometimes, it can create something startlingly new. As we move through galleries, screens, and feeds, we carry the same ancient impulse to mirror what we love, what we resist, what we desire, and what we fear. Across the centuries, representation has expanded, from flesh to pigment to pixels. And with each new medium, the mirror has widened, even as the boundaries of the real have grown less stable. Yet through every shift, mimesis continues to teach us something essential. When we shape an image, we also shape ourselves. And when we attend to representations, whether a marble arm, a painted face, or a digital apparition, we begin to see how meaning is made, how it can be lost, and how it can be made again. So perhaps the most urgent question is not whether imitation brings us closer to reality, but which reality we choose to echo. And as you close this video, notice the next image that draws you in. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself why. Then, let yourself wonder whether the world is mirroring you back, or whether you have already stepped into a reflection of your own making.